When starting, I knew there was an A, I knew there was a G. I wasn't sure whether there was a K chord or a K note. We're back in the practice again. I'm just going to literally go through the same scales, but before I start, a rant came to mind. Well, less of a rant and more of a theory, I guess. You just have a lot of the students I teach today. A lot of the students I have, there seems to be a confusion on maybe what the main things to learn are, what the most bang for buck really will be with theory, because without certain bits of knowledge, without understanding certain bits of theory, everything else doesn't make sense. You can't get all the modes, you can't get all of the fancy chords and understanding of that, and even just ideas of playing around any of that stuff without having a solid grasp of intervals and chord tones, really. So I guess that's a little bit of what I'm gonna go over today, or certainly break down, maybe like a roadmap of things to learn. So theory, you need to understand that music's made of 12 notes. That sounds basic, but I didn't know that. When starting, I knew there was an A, I knew there was a G. I wasn't sure whether there was a K chord or a K note. That's me being real. But the other next part of that is we then kind of learn a major scale. So major scale is the first thing most of us will then go to. You learn. So a lot of people can play through major scale. You might even be able to go through different shapes. If you really start digging, you might even know that, say, the second position of a major scale is Dorian, but without understanding the intervals and how they relate to the root note you're playing over, knowing that that's a Dorian does no good for you. So we need to understand things from an interval point of view, because that's then when we actually get a system that we can actually use to play over, to work out chord progressions. So unless you know your intervals, all the 12 there's 12 notes, so there's 12 intervals that you need to know. If you don't know those intervals, you don't know what they are, you don't know what they sound like, everything else becomes more complicated. So ground one, you have to learn the 12 intervals, in my opinion, or certainly your best bang for buck is learning the 12 intervals and then learning the major scale in terms of intervals as opposed to tone, semitone, tone, semitone. That's kind of like a typical school way of teaching, but it's limiting unless you break it down into intervals. So instead you got root note, major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth. That kind of standard stuff there, but that's when it becomes important, is then you start looking at chords. Triads, you understand that a major chord is a root, major third and perfect fifth. So you know, when you got that, you got those options. But then also when you're looking at, okay, Dorian scales, Mixolydian scales, the modes, you actually understand the interval formula. Because if you're still viewing it as a major scale, that's going to be no use for you. Because let's say we're in B. Knowing that it's the second position of a major scale doesn't really help you think about how to play that. You're not thinking about the chord tones. And I'm getting to grips with melodic playing still. This is something I'm working on right now. But it's you don't actually get to hear the sound of the different modes until you relate it to the chord that it's over. Because Dorian's got that sweet major six in it. It's used a lot. Kind of gives you that kind of funky vibe, but also sweetens up a minor chord. I don't even know where I'm going with that, but I think, yeah, it's just become clear the last couple weeks with my students that this is like the core fundamentals to understand chord structures. You know, root third, fifth, seventh, at least up to sevenths. Understand what that sounds like. Understand more so where they are before you even bother with all the melodic minor fancy scales, licks and runs. So that's why we end up playing the same pentatonic scales or minor scales over minor chords when they don't work. So, for example, if we're thinking A major and we're in the key of A major and we get a B minor, you can't play a natural minor scale and it sounds good over that in the context of the song. That's when you start playing notes that sound off and people kind of look like, or maybe you're playing through pentatonic shapes and stuff like that and you're like, why does that sound good over this chord but not over that chord? And that's normally to do with how the chord relates to the tonal center or just the key of the song. So we have to learn the number system and chords in relation to where they come from. So even just to get to grips with the major scale in terms of keys and knowing what chords come with that and knowing then what modes from an interval perspective of all of it, that's kind of the missing ingredient for a lot of people. It was a missing ingredient for myself. It was a missing ingredient for a few students that I've had. That seems to be a big, until you get that, everything else isn't going to make sense. So for anyone watching, that's kind of where I would start. But that's my rant over with that. I'm going to get some pentatonics done. So I'm thinking A minor pentatonic. Shouldn't even really go up, but I gotta get these hands warm. Going back down always seems smoother for me than going back up. It's probably because of how I used to practice. Let's get more of me in. You know, sometimes it's good, for me anyway, just to practice acoustically, because you can't hide behind any EQ. It's just all you and the natural sound of the instrument. This is feeling like a workout today. Ah. I had a mind blank. And why am I doing this again? This is because I want to get some of that Eric Gale's guitar sound, some of the licks that he plays, the blues stuff. in that groupings of 5 pentatonics into my bass playing. But I just have to work out the fundamentals first, get it all across the neck, feeling super smooth, so that I can have the actual choice, you know, whether I'm going up or down it, to be able to pull out some of those lines or ideas. The burn is burning. Whew. 90 BPM. 16th notes. Plucking each one. Come on. That's gonna do for today's recorded practice. Forearms are burning up from that one. So yeah, I've got to get that technique flowing smoother, get that endurance up in this hand, and build it from there. Until next time.